Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about a new neologism which is needed to establish the hierarchy of Dungeons and Dragons activity, right? Actually, Dungeons and Dragons participants. So today I want to talk about Sean Merwin and Teo Sabadia. Now, these guys are personal heroes to me, and they are higher in the hierarchy of Dungeons and Dragons participants than you or me. And the reason why is they are Wricans. What is a Wrican? Wrican. A Wrican. Okay. Newer. I am creating it, and I'm creating it because it is needed to delineate the hierarchy of Dungeons and Dragons participants. All right. So first of all, I'm not going to tell you where these guys fall completely in the hierarchy yet. First, we have to name everyone, right, who are Dungeons and Dragons participants. Now, there is one Dungeons and Dragons participant that is clearly named right now, and that is um, the Dungeon Master. You're a Dungeon Master. I'm a Dungeon Master. And generally, we know what that is, right? It's pretty high on the hierarchy. We're not going to define the hierarchy completely today, but it's known, right? The hierarchy is certainly higher than players, right? Dungeon masters are not players. You will hear some fools on the internet telling you that dungeon masters are players of Dungeons and Dragons. Do not listen to that nonsense. Dungeons and Dragons are higher on the hierarchy than people who play Dungeons and Dragons. And by the way, I don't even acknowledge the term player. I think that's wrong. We'll get into that in other videos. But right now, many people, when you say someone who plays Dungeons and Dragons and refer to him as a player, most people understand that language, which I understand that, right? So, but Dungeon Masters are clearly higher than Dungeons and Dragons players. Okay. Now let's talk about a different type of participant, a Wrican. What is a Wrican? Sean Merwin and Teos Abadia are both Wricans. They are both men who are Dungeons and Dragons participants. Now, first of all, you cannot be a Wrican if you have never been a Dungeon Master. It's impossible. And again, that's why we're talking about hierarchy today. Wricans are higher on the hierarchy than Dungeon Masters, and also clearly higher than Dungeons and Dragons, air quotes, players. I don't refer to them as that. I don't want to get into that in this video, but most people understand what Dungeons and Dragons players are through a wrong understanding, but still, it's the current language. Dungeons and Dragons player. Okay, so let's define what a Wrican is. A Wrican is a writer who has written Dungeons and Dragons canon. Right now, both Sean Merwin and Teos Abadia are Wricans. Okay, they are writers who have written Dungeons and Dragons canon. They both were instrumental in writing Acquisitions Incorporated, which is a fantastic Dungeons and Dragons uh, canon book, right? And because the two of them have written Dungeons and Dragons canon, they rank higher in the Dungeons and Dragons hierarchy, in the Dungeons and Dragons participant hierarchy than I do, okay? And we need this word to start to talk about Wricans. Now, are Wricans people who work for Hasbro right now and write Dungeons and Dragons canon? No, no. If you currently work for Dungeons and Dragons and you write Dungeons and Dragons canon, like Christopher Perkins and Jeremy Crawford, they are not Wricans. They are something different, right? Wricans are people who have written Dungeons and Dragons canon in the past and are not actively writing Dungeons and Dragons canon today, right? And so both of these men had their time with Hasbro Dungeons and Dragons, wrote D&D canon, were active participants with Hasbro in establishing Dungeons and Dragons canon and writing it, but those days are kind of over right now, right? Like right now, neither Sean Merwin or Teos Abadia, they don't sit down, they don't have any talks with Jeremy Crawford or and they're really kind of out of the limelight, right? So like if they walked into the Hasbro building, I think, I don't think they could get a meeting immediately, right? Like, whereas if Jeremy Crawford, he can walk, that's a perfect example. Neither Sean Merwin or Teo Sabadia could even walk into the Hasbro D&D offices today, right? Whereas Jeremy Crawford and Christopher Perkins and Chris Perkins absolutely can. They're a different level, right? So Ricans are people who have written D&D canon, which puts them above every dungeon master and certainly puts them above every Dungeons and Dragons player, right? But doesn't but they're still below Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford. So I wanted to define what a Rican is. I wanted to give you a sense of where they fit into the hierarchy. We'll look at the entire hierarchy when we've established the terms for every type of Dungeons and Dragons participant. All right. Thank you very much for your patience. I know this is only this is just a partial discussion of all the different types. This is me establishing a name for one type of D&D participant. So thank you for your patience, and thank you all for just going on this journey with me and allowing me to speak openly and honestly about Dungeons and Dragons and to delve into the meta of it. And I am so excited to be here with you in 2024 doing this. And I just want to say thank you so much for every view, for every comment, for and for sharpening me. Iron sharpens iron, and many of you are iron. And your comments really do help me to understand Dungeons and Dragons better. Thank you so much. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic, please consider subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.